It was supposed to be the night that sealed one of the most important partnerships in the history of international business. A room filled with chandeliers, champagne, and the quiet hum of wealth and power. The city's most influential figures were in attendance. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, all gathered in a centuries-old mansion owned by one of the richest families in America. They were known for their sprawling empire: oil, banking, shipping, and technology. Their net worth exceeded $30 billion. That night, they had invited someone who was about to bring them an opportunity unlike any they had ever seen before. Her name was Naomi Carter. Naomi was a force of nature in the business world. At only 42 years old, she was the founder and CEO of Carter Global Industries, a multinational logistics and infrastructure company that operated on 5 continents. She wasn't just wealthy. She was influential, strategic, and respected across industries, but her journey to the top had been anything but easy. Naomi grew up in New Orleans, raised by her grandparents after her parents passed away when she was just 9 years old. Money was scarce, but ambition was abundant. She excelled in school, often staying late to use the library's computers when her classmates had long gone home. At 17, she earned a scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. By 25, she was managing multi-million-dollar contracts. By 35, she had built her own empire. The $1 billion deal that brought Naomi to the family's mansion was more than just a business agreement. It was a transformative infrastructure project that would connect 3 major global markets, creating thousands of jobs and securing decades of revenue. For the billionaire family, it was an opportunity to expand their reach into an industry they had yet to dominate. For Naomi, it was a chance to prove that diverse leadership could drive large-scale success in spaces traditionally controlled by a select few. The evening began smoothly enough. Naomi arrived wearing an elegant black evening gown, her hair pulled into a sleek bun, her presence commanding without a word spoken. She greeted the family patriarch with a firm handshake and a confident smile. But as the hours went on, the atmosphere shifted. At first, it was subtle, small comments about her impressive vocabulary, the kind that sound like compliments but carry an edge. A few guests asked where she really came from, as if New Orleans was an unsatisfactory answer. As the night wore on, the remarks became sharper. One family member made a joke about how she must have fought her way into this room, followed by laughter from others. Another commented on how surprising it was to see a woman like her leading a billion-dollar company. The tone was condescending, dismissive, and tinged with the unmistakable undertone of prejudice. Naomi smiled politely, but each word was a reminder that in their eyes, she was not an equal. She was an outsider. The breaking point came when a younger member of the family, emboldened by the laughter of those around him, commented so cuttingly that the entire room fell silent. It was the kind of remark that left no doubt about its intent: to belittle, to diminish, to remind her of her place as they saw it. Naomi set down her champagne glass, looked directly at the person who had spoken, and without raising her voice, excused herself from the table. She walked toward the exit without a word to anyone else. Outside, the winter night air was crisp and still. Her driver opened the car door, and as she slid into the back seat, Naomi's mind was already moving. This was not about hurt feelings. This was about respect. And in business, respect is currency. She would not do business with people who thought so little of her humanity. Before the car even left the driveway, she sent a message to her legal team. The deal was off. By the next morning, the billionaire family's lawyers received the official notice. The $1 billion deal, months of negotiations, countless hours of preparation, was gone. The project would be awarded to a different partner, one who understood the value of mutual respect. The news rippled through the industry, sparking conversations about racism, sexism, and the cost of arrogance in high-stakes business. But Naomi's decision wasn't just about making a statement. It was about setting a standard. She knew the world was watching, and she wanted to send a clear message. No amount of money was worth tolerating disrespect. Naomi's ability to walk away from a deal of that size without hesitation didn't happen overnight. It was the result of decades of persistence, discipline, and an unwavering belief in her own worth. To understand the weight of her decision, you have to go back to where it all began, to the humid streets of New Orleans in the late 1980s. Naomi was born into a neighborhood where opportunity was a rare visitor. Her parents, both dedicated community organizers, had dreams of lifting others out of poverty, but tragedy struck when a car accident claimed their lives while Naomi was still in elementary school. Her grandparents, already in their 60s, took her in. They lived in a small, weathered home on the outskirts of the city. Money was always tight. Some weeks, bills went unpaid so that there could be food on the table. But the one thing Naomi's grandparents gave her in abundance was belief. Belief that her future did not have to be defined by her surroundings. School became her sanctuary. She would spend hours in the public library, losing herself in books about history, economics, and engineering. She was drawn to stories of people who built things, bridges, companies, movements, out of sheer determination. While other kids her age were spending afternoons at the park, Naomi was reading about global trade routes and infrastructure systems. Her curiosity became her compass, and by the time she reached high school, her grades placed her among the top students in the state. A scholarship to a prestigious university took her far from home, but she carried the lessons of her upbringing with her. At university, she majored in business administration and minored in civil engineering, an unusual combination that would later become the foundation of her career. She was often the only black woman in her classes, a fact that never went unnoticed by her peers or professors. Some doubted her abilities, others dismissed her outright. But every doubt only fueled her determination to prove herself. After graduation, Naomi entered the corporate world, starting in a junior position at a major shipping company. Her early years were marked by long hours, constant travel, and an unspoken expectation that she should be grateful just to be in the room. She learned quickly that competence was not always enough to earn respect, especially as a black woman in industries dominated by white men. There were moments when the subtle biases stung just as much as the overt ones. Meetings where her ideas were ignored until repeated by someone else. Introductions where people assumed she was an assistant rather than an executive. But Naomi had a quiet strategy. Observe, learn, build relationships with those who valued merit over image, and never let her emotions dictate her moves in the professional arena. By her early 30s, Naomi had climbed the corporate ladder, managing multi-million-dollar contracts and overseeing international projects. Yet she noticed a recurring pattern. No matter how much success she delivered for the companies she worked for, the decision-making power remained concentrated in the same small, exclusive circles. So, at the age of 34, Naomi took the leap that would define her career. She founded Carter Global Industries. The early years of Carter Global were brutal. She mortgaged her home, invested every dollar of her savings, and took on the kind of risk that would terrify most people. There were months when payroll felt like a mountain she couldn't climb. There were contracts she lost to larger competitors who had deeper pockets and longer histories. But Naomi leveraged what she had: sharp instincts, relentless work ethic, and the ability to spot opportunities others overlooked. Her breakthrough came when she secured a contract to rebuild a major shipping port in West Africa. The project was riddled with logistical challenges, but Naomi's team delivered ahead of schedule and under budget. That success became her calling card. From there, Carter Global expanded into Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, developing a reputation for handling complex infrastructure projects with precision and integrity. By the time the Billionaire family reached out about the $1 billion deal, Naomi was no longer a rising star. She was an established power player. And power, in her mind, meant the freedom to walk away when respect was no longer part of the equation. The night at the mansion was not the first time Naomi had been underestimated in a room full of wealthy white executives. But unlike in her early career, she now had leverage. She knew that the project they wanted could be offered to other partners who would treat her as an equal. And that knowledge gave her the calm resolve to leave the table when others might have stayed and swallowed the insult. When Naomi's legal team sent the cancellation notice the next morning, it landed like a thunderclap in the offices of the Billionaire family. The deal had been considered a sure thing, months of negotiations, hundreds of hours of planning, and a project that promised billions in future revenue. To lose it overnight was more than just an inconvenience. It was a public embarrassment. The initial reaction from the family's inner circle was disbelief. How could anyone walk away from that much money? In their world, business was about profit, above all else, and relationships could be patched up if necessary. But Naomi didn't see it that way. For her, the moment at the party had crossed a line that no amount of profit could justify. Within hours, calls began flooding her office. First, from the family's lawyers, seeking clarification. Then, from senior family members themselves, asked for a meeting. Naomi refused both. The contract negotiations were over. There would be no second chance. The story could have ended quietly. There, hidden behind non-disclosure agreements and corporate silence. But news travels quickly in the world of high finance, and soon whispers began circulating through the industry. Competitors wanted to know why the deal had fallen apart. Journalists began calling, sensing there was more to the story. Naomi remained strategic. She didn't release a fiery public statement or name names. Instead, she gave a single, measured interview to a respected business journal. In it, she explained her decision in terms that resonated far beyond the boardroom. She spoke about dignity, about the culture of respect that underpinned every partnership her company entered into. And then, with deliberate precision, she said, "If someone shows you they do not value you as an equal, you do not give them the privilege of doing business with you." Those words ricocheted through the business community. To some, they were an uncomfortable reminder of the unspoken biases that still thrived in elite circles. To others, they were a rallying cry, proof that power could be used to stand up against the arrogance of wealth and privilege. Meanwhile, the Billionaire family found themselves in an awkward position. Their attempt to downplay the incident only made the rumors grow louder. Some insiders claimed that younger family members had been chastised privately, while others said the family remained unapologetic, viewing Naomi's decision as an overreaction. But the damage was done. Several potential partners, wary of public perception, began to distance themselves from the family's ventures. The $1 billion deal was not just a lost opportunity, it had become a cautionary tale. For Naomi, the fallout brought an unexpected benefit. Her decision resonated with a new wave of clients who admired her stance. Within weeks, Carter Global Industries was approached by two major international firms with offers for projects of equal or greater value than the canceled deal. More importantly, these offers came from partners who respected her leadership from the outset. Naomi understood the significance of this moment. She knew she had struck a nerve, not just in business circles, but in the broader cultural conversation about race, gender, and power. The incident at the mansion had crystallized something she had experienced for years. The belief held by some that money and status gave them the right to demean others without consequence. By walking away, she had introduced consequence into the equation. Her quiet but firm refusal to work with those who disrespected her was more than a business decision. It was a statement about the kind of future she wanted to build. both for herself and for those who would come after her. The days following the canceled deal marked a turning point. Naomi didn't plan to become a public figure in a broader social debate, but the story had taken on a life of its own. Her short interview was quoted in newspapers, dissected on podcasts, and reposted on social media thousands of times. People weren't just talking about the money. They were talking about the principle that no amount of wealth should shield someone from the consequences of disrespect. Her name began trending on business networks and, surprisingly, on lifestyle channels that usually avoided corporate news. The public reaction was sharply divided. Some applauded Naomi's courage, calling her a role model and praising her refusal to sell her dignity for a paycheck. Others, particularly in elite financial circles, quietly criticized her, suggesting that her decision was emotionally driven and bad for business. But even her critics couldn't deny one truth. She had the freedom to walk away because she had built her own empire. Soon she began receiving speaking invitations from universities, women's leadership forums, and business ethics conferences. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her favorite arena. But after discussing it with her advisors, she realized these platforms gave her a chance to control the narrative, to tell the full story without it being filtered through gossip or speculation. When she finally stepped onto a stage for her first keynote, the audience was electric with anticipation. She spoke not just about the incident, but about her journey, how she'd faced subtle and overt racism while climbing the corporate ladder, how she'd been underestimated in negotiations, how she'd been the only black woman in boardrooms, more times than she could count. She didn't deliver the speech as a victim, but as a strategist. She explained that walking away from the deal had been as calculated as any business move. A risk, yes, but one that aligned with her long-term vision. She wanted partnerships that reflected her values. She wanted to prove that respect was not a negotiable line item in a contract. The impact of her words rippled beyond the stage. Young entrepreneurs, especially women of color, began writing to her, sharing their own experiences of being dismissed or belittled. Many said her story gave them the courage to set boundaries they'd previously been afraid to enforce. Media outlets began framing Naomi not just as a CEO, but as a cultural figure, someone who represented a shift in the balance of power. Articles described her as the woman who put respect above revenue, and the phrase began to stick. It became a tagline that her PR team would later incorporate into her branding. Meanwhile, the billionaire family's reputation continued to erode. A journalist eventually confirmed some of the mocking remarks that had been made at the party, and while the family still refused to publicly apologize, their attempts to secure new partnerships became noticeably harder. Naomi had never needed to name them directly. The industry already knew, and silence often speaks louder than denial. In the months that followed, Naomi leveraged the momentum to expand Carter Global Industries into new markets. She hired top talent from companies that had once looked down on her, turning former rivals into allies. Her story had transformed into something far larger than a canceled deal. It had become a case study in business schools, a prime example of how values-based leadership could create long-term strength. By the end of the year, Naomi wasn't just wealthier than before, she was more influential. And in her mind, that influence was worth more than any single billion-dollar contract. Because influence, unlike money, could change the culture of business for generations. Years later, when people recounted the story of Naomi Carter, they rarely focused on the canceled deal itself. What they remembered was the look on her face when she walked out of that gala, poised, unwavering, and unbothered by the glittering crowd behind her. They remembered the silence that followed in the days after, the way she didn't rush to defend herself online, and the precision with which she acted. Naomi never described herself as a trailblazer. In her own mind, she had simply acted in alignment with her values, But history has a way of elevating such moments into symbols, and her decision became one, a symbol of self-respect in the face of arrogance, of discipline in the face of temptation, of quiet power in a world that too often mistakes noise for influence. By then, Carter Global Industries had grown into a multinational powerhouse with offices in over 30 countries. Its portfolio was diverse, its leadership team unusually inclusive for a firm of its size, and its reputation was spotless. The company's motto, "Respect is non-negotiable," was printed on every new employee's welcome package, a silent nod to the night that had started it all. Naomi also became a mentor to countless young leaders. She held private retreats for emerging entrepreneurs, teaching them not just about profit margins and market trends, but about the unseen currents that shape business, the unspoken rules, the subtle prejudices, the moments when a single decision can define your legacy. And yet, despite her growing public profile, she kept her personal life quiet. She didn't post pictures of lavish vacations or luxury purchases. When asked why, she would simply say, "The best moments aren't for the public. They're for the soul." As for the Billionaire family, they faded into the background of the business world. Their companies still operated, but their influence had waned. Deals they might have once closed easily now slipped through their fingers. And every so often, a journalist or commentator would mention the $1 billion mistake, a reminder of the night arrogance cost them more than they'd ever admit. Naomi's story entered the archives of business history, not as a tale of loss, but as a masterclass in the power of choice. She had turned a moment of insult into a lifetime of impact. She had shown that walking away isn't a sign of weakness, but of clarity, the kind of clarity that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you will never allow. And perhaps that was the true billion-dollar decision. Not the deal she rejected, but the standard she set. A standard that told the world, your money may be vast, your name may be famous, but neither will ever be enough to buy my respect. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't the contracts you sign. They're the ones you tear up.